Thanks again. Welcome to Make Your Data Sing, an introduction to data visualization. As I mentioned before, I'm Soti, that's me. If you haven't noticed, I'm from the UK. I am a data visualization consultant and founder at DataChronicle. I describe myself as a creative geek and data storyteller. I've been working in the industry for about a bit longer than 15 years, actually. And I really love working with data, and I hope you enjoy my presentation. Now, without further ado, a very obvious glaring question is, what exactly is data visualization? Well, in many ways, it's just a fancy word to describe visualizing data with the purpose of telling a story. Some of them are very straightforward, some of them are kind of complicated and intricate, but essentially that's all it is. That being said, so what? Why data visualization? And why data visualization now? Well, it's because a lot of the time I feel like this lady in this slide. I'm suffering a lot of the time from information overload. We create so much information, so much data every minute of every day, and this is growing exponentially all the time. And it doesn't seem like it's going to slow down anytime soon. With all that information and data flying around, it's really important to visualize and communicate your data in the best way possible to help get your communication, to help improve your communication and get your points across. Data visualization can definitely help you do this. I wanted to include these slides to emphasize a point. These are slides from what are known as eye tracking studies, and this is when scientists put devices in people's eyes and monitor how they look at consume information. Whenever we look at content on the internet or in blogs or whatever, we're always scanning. I think the rule is you've got about 5 seconds. At least the old rule was you had 5 seconds. I think now they've probably timed it down to about 3 seconds. There's so much content out there. You've got about 3 to 5 seconds to get people's attention. All the red dots, all the red patches, should I say, are where people's eye move the most. So we tend to go from top to bottom, from the left-hand side to the bottom. We tend to go from the top left across the right to the right-hand side, and we tend to kind of like look around in the middle. And this is a pattern we do on every web page, on every piece of content, or everything we consume all the time, trying to make decisions about whether it's worth our time to consume this information. We are all humans, and we are all inherently visual creatures. Turns out that 50% of our brains are involved in visual processing. That is a lot of processing power focused on visual perception and interpretation. And it only takes us the 10th of a second to make sense of a visual scene. That's actually known as pre-attentive processing. That basically means when we see a symbol or an image or an outline, parts of our brain has already interpreted that and is already reacting to that before we're even consciously aware of it. That being said, when I like to create data visualizations, I like to break it down to go through these 3 different stages. To start off with, we've got the destination stage. This is concerned with where are we headed. I can't tell you the amount of times I've sat down to create data visualization. I jumped past this stage and I, fired up Excel or whatever and started, getting my hands dirty, working with the data and trying to, create a data visualization. Several hours, sometimes even days later, I realized I've wasted my time because I really didn't decide where I was headed, what I wanted to do with it. This is very, very important. I cannot stress how important that is to do at the beginning of a data visualization exercise. The next stage is the consideration stage. And this is to do with the choices you're going to make. Data visualization is actually a really vast field. It covers a lot of different things, which we're going to look at in a little bit. So you can take different routes to how to get to a certain destination. There isn't just always a straight line. There's a multitude of ways and choices you can make. And we're going to look at how you can go about making those decisions. And finally, the skills stage. This is concerned with the actual skills in your hand and putting together the decisions and choices that you've made. actually creating the data viz, choosing colors and that kind of thing. This is concerned with how are you going to get there? How are you going to produce your final product? At the destination stage, the most important thing to think about is the burning problem, the burning question, the burning thing you are trying to communicate to your audience. Essentially, you've got to answer the so what question. If you're going to put time into creating a data visualization and you're going to try and communicate this to an audience, you have to be able to answer the so what question. Because I guarantee you, as soon as you present it to someone else, they're instantly going to be thinking, so what? Why should I look at this data visualization? Why should I be concerned with it? What's in it for me? You've got to be able to answer that. And if you can't answer that at the beginning, you probably shouldn't put the time into creating a data visualization. It's probably not worth it. That probably means you need to rethink the question or the issue you've got at hand and find a different angle to kind of like support the so what question. The next thing we've got to deal with in the destination stage is to know our goal. What is it we're trying to achieve? At the end of the day, are we trying to get people to do an action, to change behavior? Are we communicating the speed at which, for instance, the polar ice caps are melting? And even if you show people this, what is it that you want them to do? Do you want to educate them? Do you want them to contact the people in the government? It's important to understand, are you trying to explain a specific point, or are you trying to give them the tools to explore an issue and get more information? At this stage, you're going to decide, are you going to create an explanatory data visualization or an exploratory one, i.e., this is my point of view, this is the point I'm trying to make, or are you going to create an interactive data visualization where the user or the audience member can then use their own intuition and filter the data and get the answers to the questions that they want to ask? The sooner you decide this, the easier life is going to be as you move through the process. After that, the most important thing, well, one of the most important things, is the audience. Who is this data visualization for? Are they a tech audience? Are they tech savvy? Or are they a non-tech audience? Is there a specific audience, i.e., is this an audience of lawyers? Are they engineers? Are they architects? Are they academics? This is really key because the style of data visualization and the language you're going to use is going to be dictated by who your audience is. If you're going to be communicating to a bunch of architects, well, then you're going to have to use architect lingo. You're going to have to use their languages. You're going to use their acronyms, their slang. This technique helps, it makes the audience believe you've invested in them, you know where they're coming from, and you're speaking their language. If your audience is the general public, then you want to cut out all the special lingo. You want to cut out all the acronyms because they're not going to really understand. You want to make it as easy as possible for your audience to consume your data visualization. Once you've got all that down, we then get on to the skills stage. This is the stage where you'd get your hands dirty and actually go about creating the data visualization. And this stage, the first thing we're concerned about is analyzing our data. It's a big misconception about data visualization that you're going to spend most of your time drawing or creating these artistic artifacts. But reality is, in data visualization, you probably spend 80% of your time data wrangling. That means cleaning data, that means flipping data, that means turning it from left to right to going from top to bottom, that means adding formulas to it. It really means, and then once you've done all that, you've got to clean it, and then you've got to analyze it. You've actually got to look into it and really understand it top to bottom. Try and find interesting patterns in the data. Try and find outliers. Is there anything that sticks out? If something sticks out, is this a result of a data quality issue, or is this in fact a genuine outlier that is a really important piece of information to communicate? Looking for trends is really important also in your data. Once you know your data inside out and you've picked out all the bits that are really important, interesting, that you think will support your message, it's time to move on to the next stage, which is storytelling. Storytelling has become a bit of a buzzword these days. That being said, it's very, very important. And why is this? Well, because as humans, we inherently consume information as stories. If I asked you what happened yesterday on your way home, you'd tell me a story. You'd instinctively know how to put a story together and you'd tell me, and I'd be like, great, I get it, thanks very much. This is a very natural thing that happens when people communicate with each other. However, it doesn't necessarily happen naturally when you're creating a data visualization. So that being said, how can we go about creating stories? As I mentioned earlier, it's easy to do when you speak to someone in person, but when you're creating an abstract object, it's a little bit trickier. What can help is this slide. If you look at the top, there is the beginning, the middle, and the end. At its most basic form, all stories have a beginning, middle, and end. And if we look at the bottom of the slide, we've got a situation, a complication, and a resolution. Basically, the situation is you're setting the scene. Where are we? Time. Where is this going on? Who are the characters? Who are the main people involved in the story? A complication, and what happened in the end. I don't know about you, but the best stories I hear are the ones that have a conflict, a battle, a struggle. If a story doesn't have a conflict or a struggle, it isn't that interesting, because it's almost like, well, a bit like a so what. It's a bit of a mundane, boring story. So generally, the best stories have a beginning. You set the scene. There's a conflict or rising action, a bit of tension, a struggle. Then the person in the story generally has to overcome this obstacle one way or another. Either they figure it out themselves or they get help from someone else to do so. There's a climax when they actually overcome the challenge or the difficulty in the story. There's what happens after they've done that. They've become a better person. They figured out how to do something. They're smarter than they were before, etc. And finally, where to now? This pattern is really helpful and essential to put in your data visualizations. Now, even if people do not consume your data visualizations in a linear way, in fact, they won't. They're going to look at the first thing that grabs their attention, they're going to look at something else, and so on and so forth. But the whole thing as a piece, you need to have as many elements of this in your data visualization as possible. We'll have a look at a chart makeover I did in a few slides' time, but it's worth bearing in mind that it's really important to think of the elements of the story when you're creating data visualization. The next thing I'd like to talk about is charts. Now, most data visualizations are essentially going to be graphs and charts. Some of them are going to be infographics. Some of them are going to be a combination of all different charts and graphs and graphics. But at its most basic level, the general rule is if your audience is used to using complicated chart types and it's a small select group, a specific audience, well, then it's okay to use a complicated chart type, because your audience will understand it. They're used to seeing it. If you've got an engineering audience and they're used to using histograms or Venn diagrams, for instance, by all means, go for it. If your audience is the general public, you have to ask yourself, how much time or how easy will it be from a member of the general public to understand this graph or this chart? If they're going to have to invest a bit of time to understand it, you might want to rethink that. Another rule is, if in doubt, stick to the most basic ones: pie charts, line charts, and column charts, bar charts. Never try to squeeze more than one message into a chart. only one message per chart at a time. If you've got more than one message you're trying to communicate, well, by all means, have more than one chart. It's okay to have 2 charts. It's okay to have 3 charts, but only one chart for one message. Otherwise, it gets really confusing, and basically people move on. They don't give it the time of day. And also another tip is if you're creating a pie chart, it's not a good idea to have more than 5 slices, because people have a real hard time discerning between the different sizes of the slices if you get more than 5 there. This slide, I'm trying to communicate the importance of branding and color. When you create data visualization, the best thing to do is use the style guide. Now, a style guide, if you work for an organization or business, basically the colors from their website or the colors from your institute that your organization uses in its magazines, in its digital products, in its brochures, use those colors in your data visualization. It really helps to give credibility to your data visualization, and it gives it a home. It ties in with the rest of the brand. It makes it more uniform and consistent. It's very important because people can then also recognize that it's from your organization. And when it comes to color, I was going to say, that being said, when it comes to color, you can make color accessible as well. You can do different versions of your data visualization. By that, I mean there are some people in the world who are colorblind. So it's not just as simple as using good colors for data visualization. You've also got to think about the fact that some people are colorblind. There are also websites out there, such as colorbrewer.com, who can look at a color palette and tell you whether or not people with different types of color blindness will be susceptible or have problems with it. So there are tools out there that can help you do that. And also, I'd like to talk about the importance of shining a light. By that, I mean in a graph or chart, it's important to use a specific color or put emphasis on the key bit of information you want someone to see. Once again, we'll look at an example in a second when I show you an example. However, you've got to remember that people want to consume information as quickly as possible. By shining a light and basically highlighting a key bit of information, you're saving people time, and they will thank you for it, and they will get the message you are trying to convey as quickly and as easily as possible. With that said, I would like to share with you this example of a chart makeover I did for a client a couple of years back. They were an estate agents. I believe you guys probably call them realtors or real estate agents. I'm not entirely sure what you guys call them in the States. They basically took this chart on the left-hand side and included it in a report that they sent out to their clients. I worked with them to give the chart a makeover and basically redesign it. I started off by looking at the title. On the left-hand side, the top 2 titles are very generic. Just says figure 3, average house price by UK country, etc., etc. Pretty generic, pretty bland, very uninspiring. I redid it to say, England has seen the greatest increase in house prices of all the UK home countries since January 2005. I basically sat down with my client and I said, what's the point? What's the burning issue you're trying to get across? So what? Why are you showing this chart? And that was essentially it. The title was the point. And it's a great idea to use that, incorporate that into the title, because people, if you think about the eye tracking scanning, straight away people have scanned the top title and gone, is this relevant to me? Is it not? Am I interested in English house prices or not? If they are, great, they're going to carry on and keep looking at it. If they're not, they're going to move on. A great title like that also helps with storytelling. That's setting the scene. That's kind of giving the where are we, what's happening, when is it happening? This is in, since 2005. Straight away, you're getting an idea of what's going on here. I then used some subtext under the title to give more information about the chart. England saw an increase of 5.4% in average house prices to 243 grand. whilst Wales saw a rise of 3.1% to 151 grand, etc., etc. Further giving more information, and also by doing that, I was able to take away a lot of the clutter from this chart. If you look at the y-axis on the left-hand side of the charts, of both the charts, on the left-hand side chart, we've got all the different values going from top to bottom. I've completely removed it on the right-hand side, except for the beginning value of 0 and the final value of £250,000. On the x-axis along the bottom, I've also taken away the time information. I've just left the start time, which was July 2005, and July 2017. Now, with this chart type, it didn't matter. It wasn't relevant to leave all that bit of information in. So it just took it out. It wasn't relevant. What was relevant was the increase in house prices and the fact that England had the greatest rise in house prices in that period of all the home countries in the UK. I mentioned in the last slide the importance of shining a light. Shining a light in this instance was me highlighting England in that bright color purple, because that's the whole point. That's the information that we want to communicate to our audience as soon as they look at this chart. I then grade everything else out and put that in the background. If they want to compare the rise of English house prices compared to Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland, they can see that. They're all grayed out. Once again, making it easier for your audience to consume that information. And at the bottom of the chart, it's very important to put information as to where this data came from, so that people, if they wanted to look into it to verify it or to do some more of their own research, they know where to get it from. With all of that said, I would like to encourage you all to either get started looking at some charts or graphs that you've created in the past and trying to rejig them, and basically using some of these principles. And if you don't have any, you could also use these groups. They're on social media, especially Twitter, but they're on, you know, if you follow these hashtags, they're on different platforms as well. These events, if you like, they're online data viz events. They happen monthly. Most of them happen weekly, to be honest with you. All the data is free. Anybody can participate. Basically, at the beginning of the week, you'll get on Sunday or a Monday, you'll get a free, a new data set, which you can download, analyze, and create a data viz from, or a chart. And then you share them online using that hashtag, and people comment, and most of these communities are really, really supportive, and it's a great way to practice your skills and get some feedback. In my final slide, I'd like to leave you with this, which is a tools and resources slide. This is to help you help you create more data visualizations. On the top left hand is the Data Visualization Society. I'm a member of that. You don't have to be a member to make use of this society. They've got amazing free resources on their website. Events that are happening, data viz, and meetups, resources you can download. I highly recommend it. You go there as a port of call to start to get a lot of information. The rest of the stuff on this slide is about tools. Excel, we all know and love or hate, depending. One tip I'd give you about Excel is never, ever, ever use the default color palette. It's okay to start off with, obviously, but when you're about to put that Excel chart in your report or put it on the web, change the colors to the colors of your brand, of your business, or of your organization. It just makes instantly makes your data viz look more serious, more competent, more professional. And yeah, it instantly lifts it. Canva is a great, if you haven't heard of it, is a great design tools. It's kind of like, it's a web package. It's like a design tool for dummies. Fantastic. I love it. I use it all the time. It's like riding a bike with the stirrups, the stabilizers on the back. It makes it really easy. You don't have to be a designer. It makes it easy to choose colors, change colors, and move shapes around. Highly recommend that. It's a free product. There's also some things you'd pay for in it, but the free use of it is more than, it's really, really good. I recommend that. PowerPoint, we all know about. Once again, don't use the default colors. Power BI is a Microsoft product. It's a fantastic product. I love it. I'd probably say it's probably intermediate to Expert, it's got a free product again, which is very, very useful. You can do a lot with that without paying anything. Tableau, also a very good data visualization tool. I would say medium to expert as well. They've got a free version, but probably Power BI has probably got, the free version has probably got more out of the box tools. But hey, try both and see which one you like. Next to Tableau is something called Inkscape, which is a graphics tool, kind of like a Photoshop thing. It's free, open source. The right of that, the AI is Adobe Illustrator. That's not free, but very popular in the industry. Those two are definitely, I would say, expert tools. Data Wrapper and Plotly are fantastic, great, free and paid. The free versions are good as well for creating graphs, charts. Highly recommend those. Very good off the bat. Venngage is an infographics creation tool. Those three, Data Wrapper, Plotly, and Venngage, are all web-based. HighCharts is similar to Plotly and Data Wrapper. D3 is a highly skilled expert data visualization creation tool. I wouldn't recommend that unless you are good programming JavaScript, but the finest, some of the finest data viz in the world are created with D3. It's a great package, but expert. And finally, Mapbox is a fantastic map making data visualization tool. With that, I thank you very much for viewing my presentation. I hope you found it useful, and I'd like to end there and ask if anybody's got any questions.
If you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, or you can come off mute and ask them aloud. But I can get us started if I can. One of the questions that I had from your presentation was, how do you communicate how long the data wrangling process is for people who don't understand? Like, they just want the outcome and they think that they should get their visualization quickly, but they just don't understand all the time it takes to data wrangle.
That's a very, very good question. I would say it's managing expectations. It's showing. When I sit down with people and I'm like, this is what you want, and this is where we are, and this is how we're going to get there. There's nothing better than sitting down with your boss or your clients and actually let them look over your shoulder and actually going, well, this is how it is. If we tried to get this, we'd have to do that. And when they actually see, once they can see it themselves, they can see the data in a messed up state. I like to do a quick analysis of how good or bad the data is and highlight how bad it is and show them that. Because a lot of people assume that, oh, it's in an Excel spreadsheet, the data's there, we've got the data. No, just because you've got the data, that's just the starting point. I highlight different things. I say, look, the data needs to be clean, and I show them errors in the data. I also will flip the data or change it from going from left to right. A lot of Excel spreadsheets go from left to right, but when you're doing data viz or doing calculations, you've got to go from top to bottom. I'll then flip a bit of it and show them that and go, we've got to do this to this so that we can calculate X, Y, Z. You don't have to do a lot. You just have to show them the different aspects of the wrangling. And I found when I sit down with people, you can already see them going, they kind of suck their teeth and they kind of do that. And you think, yes, they're getting it. Yeah, that's how I would do. When you sit down with that meeting, you don't bore them, but just do your homework and take different aspects of the data wrangling and cleaning process, different snapshots of it, and show them so that they can go, okay, we are here with the data and we need to go to get here. And then only when we get here can we actually start, creating some visuals.
Great tip, thank you.
Is that the only question we got?
We have a comment. So someone says the color blindness tip is great, that they took a course that mentioned how using green and red, normally representing good and bad concepts in the Western world, is actually not acceptable for people with color blindness.
Yes, a great point. When I do longer ones, I actually talk about cultural differences with color as well. I think color, I'm not entirely, I can't remember now, but I think red means something completely different in China than it does in the West. or is it white? I don't know. Anyway, you have to be really careful with color, and you have to look into the cultural differences of color. I think green would be like go for in the West, and red's like stop. That doesn't necessarily mean what it is, in different cultures. To be honest with you, I haven't had the opportunity yet for that to be an issue, but it's definitely worth mentioning. And with some of these websites, like I mentioned earlier, it's fascinating to kind of go through some of these color palettes, because you think you've got a great color palette. They can give you a color palette. If your organization doesn't have one, you can pick purple ones, you can pick blue ones, you can have but then also you can flick a switch and they will show you what it looks like to people with different bits of color blindness. It's very, very fascinating. And sometimes you just have to make the best of it. You can't solve the problem for everybody, but people should be able to tell the differences between the shades. They should be able to see a very, very dark shade and a very, very light shade at the very least. So yeah, a great point about the use of color there.
Someone in the chat just asked if you can say the website to check for colors and color blindness again.
I think someone has just put it in the. It's called Color Brewer. Yeah.
Just dropped it in the chat. Thanks, Anthony.
That's the one. That's great. Yeah. So yeah, with that website, you can choose different color palettes, and then also you can literally click a checkbox, and it will like give you colorblind safe ones and that kind of thing, and print friendly and all sorts of stuff. I could spend hours in that, to be honest with you, trying different settings. Which is why if you work for an organization that's got a style guide, it's fantastic. It saves you a lot of trouble, because I worked for a non-for-profit once, and we didn't have a strong brand, and we went through a branding process, and there was a lot of kickback, and people were really kind of like fighting it, kind of going, oh, we've done our own thing in different departments. It looked awful to the outside world. Different departments having different colors. It looks disjointed. It looks like the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing in an organization. But the best thing that these people didn't realize, I worked a lot with researchers and academics. As soon as we got the style guide in, they were so much happier, because they didn't have to think. They've got enough things to think about as it is. The last thing they wanted to think about was what color am I going to use? What am I going to, as soon as they got a style guide, they just used the colors in the style guide. It was one less thing to think about, and it actually went down really well. So I highly recommend you use a style guide or find one. And if you guys haven't got one, I would say, kick the marketing department to create one.
I experienced the same at a nonprofit, so I know exactly what you mean. We also have another question. Bobby asked, what is your data cleaning / data wrangling process?
I am a big fan of Power Query. You can get Power Query in Excel, I think got it in Excel 210. It's an add-on, but I think from Excel to 2016. Sorry, Excel 2010 is an add-on. I think from 2016 onwards, it's built into Excel. It's also part of Power BI. It's fantastic. There is a way in Power Query where you can profile the data, i.e. you can look at every single column and it'll figure out how long the data is in every column, what are different types of characters are in it, are there any anomalies in the data and anything that sticks out. I generally kind of do that for every single column first. And then I sort it both ways alphabetically. And then I look and eyeball it. And then I start cleaning it based on what I find from the profiling. I start cleaning it that way. It would be worth. It's not hard at all. It's a very intuitive tool to use, Power Query. Back 5 years ago, back in the day, it's 5 years ago. Before or pre 5 years ago, there were a lot of different tools out there that were very unintuitive. You were even doing it in SQL in the database, or you were doing it using Excel formulas, an absolute nightmare. With Power Query now, you are literally pointing and clicking, and it's got the same design as the ribbon at the top of Microsoft Word, top of Excel. I recommend that. It's probably worth spending half an hour Googling on YouTube how to use Power Query or doing a course. It's well worth it, because it's actually fun, which sounds weird to do, but even though I love working with data, I never enjoyed cleaning data or wrangling data, because it was such a pain until Power Query came out. And the great thing about Power Query is every time you do something, it remembers that it stores that as a step. So you can clean this data and you can have like 1, 2, you can have up to 20, 50 steps. But the next time you add another piece of data, if it's the same, you can run through the same steps, but you don't have to manually do it yourself. You can just point it to a new set of data and it will go through the whole thing again. So it really makes it easy. I recommend that. And yeah, I think, yeah, Power Query is the way I would suggest.
So I don't see any more questions coming in. So with that, everyone is just thanking you for your great presentation. And thank you all for joining us as well. And we hope you enjoy the rest of your Black in Data Week.
I just wanted to say as well, thank you to Anthony Sparks for putting so many useful links in the chat. Those are excellent links and pointing you to the right places to go for some of these resources. Thanks a lot, Anthony. And thanks a lot, everybody. It's been a pleasure. I hope you have great rest of the day and Black in Data Week. Thank you.